Good morning. Um, when I joined this church 25 years ago, my children were in elementary school. I was newly single. My then husband had just gone to prison for embezzling money from his clients, and I was trying to rebuild a life for my children and me. Excuse me, this isn't easy. Our comfortable middle-class lifestyle had vanished as we sold everything in an attempt to pay back my husband's clients. The children and I moved to a small rental condo. I drove an old beat-up car with duct tape on the open window, and I began to look for a job. We do get to joy, I promise. The condo was cold and dark. Electric heat was expensive, so we used it sparingly. Clothing for Sarah and Andrew was mostly hand-me-downs or gift cards from generous friends. Dinner was often Progresso soup and bagels. In the grocery store, we bought only what was on sale. Because my husband's name, our family name, had been on TV and radio and in the newspaper, gratefully this was before the internet, everyone knew what he had done, and it was difficult to find a job married to a convicted felon. Some people wondered if I was involved with his stealing. I was not. Eventually, I found a consulting job, but it was a short-term contract with no benefits. Slowly, the days and the weeks and the months got better. There were so many angels in my life at that time, some of them members of this church, helping me in little ways and big ways with the kids, the house, my job, and finances. I was so grateful for their help, but a quiet lurking depression surrounded me because I still felt powerless to fix things for myself and my kids. Powerlessness as a mother is terrifying. The children and I came to church regularly. It was a safe place in the middle of our churning world. The kids would go to Sunday school, and I would sneak into the church, sitting in the way back on the right-hand side, not wanting to be seen. I was ashamed of my life, but I usually drove home a little more hopeful than when I had arrived. AHCC was a gentle glue that held me together. When I was asked to make a weekly pledge, I agonized about the decision. Every dollar I had, I needed for food and bills, repairs on a car that broke down predictably, clothes for children who were growing too fast. I chatted with God, something I did on my morning runs, and finally committed to $5 a week. It was a lot of money for me then, but I felt I could manage it. Each Sunday morning when I wrote the check, I was proud of myself, not an emotion I felt very often. I was keeping a commitment I had made to myself and the church. The sacrifices I had made during the week so I had the money to give on Sunday no longer felt like sacrifices because it was my choice and I could do this. It gave me a moment of not quite joy yet, but satisfaction. I was sharing money I could have used. It wasn't much, but it was everything. Sitting in the sanctuary, dropping the envelope into the collection plate made me feel powerful instead of powerless, and maybe a little bit joyful because I knew I was doing what I could. I had made a bold decision. I felt a little stronger and a little less ashamed. My children went to Sunday school, on mission trips, and attended confirmation class. I was on the Love Hartford Committee, a search committee, and deacons. All three of us were part of the Boar's Head Festival each year. By getting involved and volunteering, we made new friends, and we did some good work, and we became part of this church community. Through the magic of God's grace and this community, we continued to heal. Each year, my pledge grew a little. I always increased it by whatever was asked, 3%, 6%, 10%. For the first few years, that was only $1 a week. As the amounts got larger, I got more anxious. For 5 years, I was sole support of my kids. 1 year, I was within 2 weeks of not having a job. That was the worst year. I talked to Gary Miller, who was our minister then, and he made it clear that if my circumstances changed and I couldn't keep my weekly commitment to the church, that was okay. Luckily, it never came to that. I moved from being a consultant to being an employee at the company with a predictable salary and benefits. My children grew. The challenges of childhood were replaced with the challenges of adolescence. Through all those years, AHCC was a stable presence in our lives. My pledge is now over $300 a month. It's a lot of money for a retired single woman, but it's the right amount for me to give. 25 years ago, all joy vanished from my life. Being part of this church community has given me back that joy and has continued to do so every week since, sometimes in the least expected places, sometimes just a little light, sometimes overwhelming, make me cry joy. I think part of the reason giving has been so spiritual and powerful for me is that by contributing what I can to support AHCC, I am not passive. I'm co-creating with God. He does all the heavy lifting, but I am doing my part. And it all started because I made a weekly pledge to give what I could. I decided to tell my story because life can be hard for all of us. We all have difficult, sometimes seemingly impossible challenges, but this church can be a beacon of hope and a source of strength. And giving isn't just important for the church, it's important for the giver. So if you think what you give doesn't matter, I think you're wrong. It matters. You matter. I remain messy and imperfect and loved by God.